She was just 16, a bright, spirited high schooler with dreams of a future filled with promise. But in the early hours of this quiet suburban night, her life came to a horrifying end at the hands of the one person she trusted most, her own father. What drove a man to commit such an unthinkable act? And were there warning signs that everyone missed? Tonight, we uncover the haunting details of a father's descent into darkness, a murder-suicide that left a community shattered, and questions that may never be fully answered. Welcome to True Crime Acts, where we explore the untold stories behind the world's most chilling crimes. I'm your host, and tonight we look into the devastating story of a father's unimaginable betrayal, a murder-suicide that left an entire town grappling with grief and confusion. Together, we'll retrace the timeline, uncover the red flags, and examine how this tragedy could have been prevented. Stay tuned, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to join us for more compelling cases. She was a bright, talented 16-year-old who seemed destined for success. Teachers praised her academic achievements, while friends admired her kindness and loyalty. Her dreams stretched far beyond her small town: college, a career in science, and the hope of one day making a difference in the world. She was the kind of person people gravitated toward, lighting up every room she entered. At school, she excelled in academics and extracurricular activities, earning a reputation as both a leader and a friend. Her peers described her as driven but humble, someone who never hesitated to lend a helping hand. Teachers often spoke about her potential, predicting she would achieve great things. But behind her cheerful exterior, her home life told a different story, one of mounting pressure and tension. Her relationship with her father had always been complicated. Once a loving parent, his demeanor began to shift in the years following her parents' divorce. Friends noticed subtle changes in her behavior: missed social events, a reluctance to talk about her family, and a growing sense of isolation. She seemed distracted, one classmate recalled, like something was weighing her down. What were the unseen pressures that shaped her life? And how did the cracks in her family dynamic go unnoticed until it was too late? The father was once known as a quiet but devoted parent. Neighbors described him as a hardworking man who doted on his only child, often seen cheering her on at school events or helping her with homework. But as the years went by, cracks began to appear in his outwardly calm demeanor. His divorce marked a turning point, leaving him emotionally and financially strained. Those closest to him noticed subtle changes. He became withdrawn, his temper flaring over minor inconveniences. Co-workers described him as distracted and irritable, while friends noticed he had grown increasingly isolated. Despite these signs, no one could have predicted the extent of his internal turmoil or the devastating consequences it would have. Psychologists later speculated that his struggles stemmed from a mix of financial instability, feelings of inadequacy, and an inability to cope with loss. But were these pressures enough to drive a man to commit an unthinkable act? What warning signs were missed, and could someone have intervened before it was too late? In the days leading up to the tragic murder-suicide, subtle but significant changes hinted at the storm brewing behind closed doors. The father's mood had become increasingly erratic, and his temper flared over trivial matters. He wasn't the same person anymore, a neighbor later remarked. You could see it in his eyes. Something wasn't right. At school, the daughter confided in a close friend, mentioning arguments at home and her father's growing pressure on her to excel. Family members recalled his unusual behavior during their last interactions with him. He canceled plans abruptly and made cryptic comments about fixing everything soon. At the same time, the daughter had been pulling away from social activities and focusing more on her studies. Friends noticed her becoming quieter, as if carrying a burden too heavy to share. On the evening of the incident, neighbors reported hearing raised voices coming from the home. It sounded like they were arguing about something serious, one neighbor said. But by the time the shouting stopped, it was too late. Those closest to them would later wonder, were these moments cries for help that no one recognized? What pushed this family to its breaking point? And could someone have stepped in to change the outcome? March 4, 2023 began like any other evening in the quiet neighborhood. The father and daughter shared dinner in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. But as the hours wore on, tension in the house began to rise. Neighbors later recounted hearing muffled voices, followed by a loud argument. "It was around midnight," one neighbor recalled. "Then everything went quiet. Too quiet. At approximately 12:30 a.m., 2 gunshots shattered the silence. The first struck the daughter, ending her life instantly. The second was directed at the father himself, completing the tragic act." Police arrived at the scene minutes later, responding to a 911 call from a distraught neighbor who heard the shots. What they found inside the home was nothing short of horrifying. Investigators described the scene as haunting, a snapshot of a family torn apart by unresolved struggles. Blood spatter patterns and the placement of the bodies indicated that the father had planned the act meticulously, leaving little room for doubt about his intentions. How did a seemingly ordinary night turn into one of unimaginable horror? And could this tragedy have been prevented? The scene inside the house was one of unimaginable devastation. Responding officers found the father and daughter in the living room, their bodies lying close together. The father, slumped against the couch, still held the weapon in his hand. The daughter lay lifeless nearby, her face still bearing the shock of betrayal. Investigators immediately identified the event as a murder-suicide, the evidence painting a grim picture of what had occurred. As word spread, the community was shaken to its core. Friends, family, and classmates couldn't fathom how such a tragedy could have unfolded. "She was the sweetest person I ever knew," a friend tearfully recalled. "It's hard to believe someone she loved and trusted could do this to her." The shock was compounded by the father's previously quiet demeanor. What had pushed him to commit such an unthinkable act? The coroner's report confirmed the sequence of events, solidifying the narrative of a father who had taken his daughter's life before ending his own. But the discovery raised more questions than it answered. Were there hidden signs no one had recognized? And what drove him to plan such a deliberate and violent act against his own child? Could the tragedy have been prevented if someone had stepped in sooner? Or were the warning signs too subtle to see until it was too late? Understanding what drove the father to commit such a heinous act requires delving into his mental state. Experts speculate that the mounting pressures of financial instability, a bitter custody battle, and feelings of inadequacy created a perfect storm. For some individuals, the psychologist explains, these factors can spiral into a dangerous mindset where violence feels like the only way to regain control. Investigators also uncovered troubling entries in the father's journal, where he expressed feelings of failure and frustration. In one chilling passage he wrote, "I can't let her grow up in a world where everything falls apart." Was this a distorted attempt to protect his daughter, or a selfish act born of desperation? Some family members revealed that the father had been withdrawn and irritable in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. Yet, no one could have predicted this level of violence. His actions seemed calculated, not impulsive, leaving a haunting question. Was this premeditated, and did he see himself as a savior or a destroyer? What could have been done to break through the walls of his anguish, and how can similar tragedies be prevented in the future? The news of the murder-suicide sent shockwaves through the community. The victim, a promising student known for her kindness and bright future, had touched the lives of so many. Friends and classmates struggled to comprehend how such a tragedy could happen to someone so beloved. "She was the kind of person who made you feel like you mattered," one friend said. "It's hard to believe she's gone, and in such a horrible way." Neighbors too were shaken, reflecting on the moments they might have missed. Some recalled hearing raised voices from the home in the days leading up to the incident, but assumed it was a typical family disagreement. Others described the father as polite but distant, never hinting at the turmoil beneath the surface. "You never think something like this could happen on your street," one neighbor said. "We all feel like we failed her somehow." The tragedy ignited conversations about the importance of recognizing the signs of mental distress and familial abuse. Community leaders organized forums to educate residents about intervention and support resources. Yet even as the town came together to mourn, lingering questions hung in the air. Could anyone have stopped this? And how can communities ensure such tragedies are not repeated? What can a community learn from such an unimaginable loss? And how can these lessons be used to save others in similar situations? The case quickly garnered national attention, with headlines painting a tragic and sensational picture of the events. News outlets focused heavily on the father's mental state and the daughter's promising future, sparking widespread debates about mental health, domestic violence, and the warning signs that often go unnoticed. It's the kind of story that makes people question everything, one journalist said. Could this have been stopped, or was it inevitable? While some coverage aimed to highlight the systemic issues behind familial violence, others leaned into sensationalism, speculating wildly about motives without sufficient evidence. Experts criticized the media's approach, warning that such portrayals could stigmatize mental health struggles rather than foster understanding. This isn't just a story, one advocate said. It's a wake-up call, but it needs to be handled responsibly. The media storm brought attention to the broader issue of domestic violence, but also left the victim's remaining family members to grapple with public scrutiny. It's hard enough to process what happened, a relative said. Now we have to deal with the world dissecting it. The spotlight eventually faded, but the questions it raised about intervention and accountability lingered. How do we balance the need for awareness with respect for those left behind? And can media coverage truly spark change, or does it do more harm than good? The tragedy of the murder-suicide left more than just heartbreak. It left important lessons about recognizing the warning signs that often precede violence. Experts analyzing the case highlighted several red flags, including the father's growing isolation, his financial struggles, and his erratic mood swings. These signs aren't always obvious to those closest to the person, the psychologist explained, but they're often there if we know what to look for. The daughter, too, showed signs of distress that were overlooked. Friends recalled her pulling away from social activities and seeming preoccupied in class. She wasn't herself in those last few weeks, one classmate admitted. I wish I had asked her what was wrong. These moments, while subtle, could have been opportunities for intervention. This case also underscored the importance of communication. Many families fear speaking openly about their struggles due to shame or stigma, creating an environment where problems fester in silence. Advocates stress the need for community vigilance and the role of friends, neighbors, and educators in spotting potential dangers. We all have a part to play, said a domestic violence survivor. Even one small action can make a difference. In the wake of this devastating tragedy, the community has found ways to honor the victim's memory while advocating for change. Her high school established a scholarship in her name, awarded annually to students who embody her spirit of kindness and academic excellence. We want her legacy to inspire others, a teacher said at the dedication ceremony. She may be gone, but she will never be forgotten. The case has also led to broader discussions about mental health and domestic violence, sparking initiatives aimed at early intervention and prevention. Community leaders organized workshops to educate residents about recognizing and addressing red flags, while local schools implemented programs focused on emotional well-being. This is how we honor her, said one advocate, by ensuring that no one else has to endure what she did. As we reflect on this heartbreaking story, we are reminded of the importance of awareness, compassion, and action. Tragedies like this leave scars, but they also offer a chance to learn, grow, and build a safer future for others. Thank you for watching this episode of True Crime Acts. If her story moved you, please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to join us in uncovering more stories that matter. Together, we can shine a light on the darkest corners and ensure no one is forgotten.